Most women of a certain age, the author writes, weren't allowed to thrive at all, or they felt forced to make a choice not to. We are still made up of generations who have been raised by tired moms. This is an excerpt of a book called On Our Best Behavior by Elise Loehnen. We talk about a little bit about this book and a bunch of other things as we talk about reclaiming our power in today's episode of Rebirth. Did you know Rebirth is also a book? You can order it online or at any of your local favorite bookstores. Let me know how you find it. If you're curious about the Listen to Her sessions, they're specifically designed for intuitive clarity to arrive and resound over your daily noise and doubt. They gift you with available insight and inspired action, personally and professionally, uplifting your daily reality and collective frequency, because that's what magnetism does. If you're curious, go to katebretton.com where you can learn more. Now let's get back to the episode. In this episode, we're going to talk about power. I know, it seems like it's something that so many of us want, but in this episode, or in this season, actually, we're going to be talking about, magnetizing from within. And a lot of times when I talk with women who are feeling like things aren't getting going or started, or they're not clear of their path, there is a hesitancy to assume full power. You're like, well, why would that be? And I've had male coaches tell me, you just go for it. And I agree with that, but when I talk to women who are on the middle of their path, a lot of them who, like me, did a lot of yang, pushing, achieving, when you get to a certain stage in life, it seems there is a deep invitation to magnetizing. There is let's say an opposite, like a polarity, like you did it one way, and that is great. And for you to grow and evolve as a spirit, as a being, as a person in the curriculum of your life, it's time for you to do it a different way, And I think that's part of probably if you were used to doing it the passive way, the surrender way, you might have to go into action, right? That would make sense. So when we talk about power and assuming power, I'm making this invitation explicit to those who feel like maybe they weren't good enough or it wasn't safe enough. And, the word safe is way overused for my personal choice in these moments. But I was reading a book by Elise Loehnen called On Our Best Behavior, The 7 Deadly Sins and the Price Women Pay to Be Good. And in her chapter on pride, she talks about how, if you were a little bit too boisterous or you caused a little bit too much trouble, you could have been ostracized, stoned, hung, burned, and that lives within us. And I'm preferring to not focus on, what I want to focus on is the unwinding of that. What I want to focus on is, okay, what do we do with the incarnation we have right now? What do we do if I was in a bad relationship and now I'm not, right? What do we do if I quit my job and I don't know how to harness my own path or my living situation? So I want all of those generational pieces, which I think are way more significant than we're taught, to be a part of the conversation, but I would like the focus of it to be less on why we can't and more on why we're here to change, why we're here to unwind it, to alchemize it, neutralize it, and assume rightful personal sovereignty, which is ultimate power. So in the book, when she ends the chapter on pride, she references Glennon Doyle's bestseller Untamed, where Glennon Doyle references Oprah. And the reason I'm giving you that specific trail, right, is because when I first started to learn about feminine philosophy was when I was a gender studies minor, okay, in the late 1990s, when gender studies meant women. It just meant We got to read a couple philosophy texts that were written by women. Everything else was written by men. And we got to read Carol Gilligan and learn about care ethics, which incidentally landed me a job interview. If you're like, what are you talking about? So I was an English major, gender studies minor with a close secondary minor in philosophy. So I've been like this my whole life, talking, reading, making sense of things. And in a job interview for a test prep company, which I was going to be a trainer and eventually a director, they asked me the question about who would I want to have like dinner or lunch with or something. I think I said like the Dalai Lama, Bruce Springsteen, and Carol Gillian. And he was like, why did you say Carol Gillian? And I was like, oh, I'm really fascinated by care ethics and that women understand their existence through the web of relationships that they live in, and that women will define themselves as partner of, wife of, mother of, daughter of, that they see themselves in that web. And that made a lot of sense to me. And I found out after that I got the job that the man's wife knew Carol Gillian. And that was really impressive to him in that moment. It's just, the reason I bring that up is like, sometimes we tuck away the things that we love because we think they might not be received or understood. And I just blurted it out because it was on my brain, and it ended up being the differential in the job interview. So take it for what it was worth. I don't know what job interviews are like now. I don't know if a bot would really care or has any care ethics, but that's a conversation for another day, unless we correlate it to women being in power and understanding that relationship and human skills are necessary for a fruitful life, and that our human interaction and interconnection is more considerate and more indicative of a fruitful life, and we reassign our values, right? Okay, so in homage to Carol Gillian, I gave you the relationship web of this quote, which would have been the author of On Our Best Behavior, referencing Glennon Doyle, who references Oprah, who says, quote, "Playing dumb, weak, and silly is a disservice to yourself and to me and to the world. Every time you pretend to be less than you are, you steal permission from other women to exist fully. Don't mistake modesty for humility." Yeah, I'll read that to you again. "Playing dumb, weak, and silly is a disservice to yourself and to me and to the world. Every time you pretend to be yourself, every time you pretend to be less than you are, you steal permission from other women to exist fully. Don't mistake modesty for humility." I don't know if you're stealing permission from other women, but you're definitely reaffirming that playing small is the appropriate thing to do. So how do we assume power? And I think the key word in there is humility, humbly. And I don't mean the humble where you bow your head, although that sometimes is incredibly appropriate. I mean the humble that that your power can exist alongside another, that you can be the queen. I had a client used to say, I could be the queen of my hive and you could be the queen of yours. And bees are a phenomenal example, right? Because they understand the power of community. They understand that the queen cannot reside without them. And if the queen is not living in alignment, what happens to her? Quite horrible, actually. She gets suffocated. They rub their little legs and they suffocate her. She is fried. So people could say, oh, that's so cruel. But is it? Or is it a community thriving and understanding that being beneficial and being led, having a sense of power that leads a community, but the power is in service to the community, is actually the way that the sweetness of life comes, the honey comes. So, sometimes when I am talking to practitioners and coaching them about whatever they've brought to me as their intention, I'll often shift the spotlight onto them. And if they're in healing arts, service, teaching, or parenting, they'll often use language that lets me know that they can't, they are really so focused on the other that they're not there. And I'm like, listen, if you've removed yourselves from the conversation, that is not validation of you doing a good job. Okay, you need to be a part of the conversation. Now, a good practitioner works so hard at their craft that they can create a detached space. Good parenting is being so clear in your guidance that you can be unattached to a tantrum, whether that tantrum is coming from any age group, right? That you can allow the person their emotions and not go down, but you haven't removed yourself. You're not a part of the conversation. And I think that's one of the things that women have done to survive, to learn how to sidestep and how to move forward and how to move sideways. And I don't think any of that is wrong, because it is. And I just think what could serve us is including ourselves in the conversation and trusting ourselves with a larger capacity of power. And I'm referencing our innate capacity for power. And everyone's capacity and emanation of power is different. Some people are loud, some people are quiet, some people are public, some people are private. So there's not one definition. But all of us know if we're residing comfortably, embodied and ensouled in this vessel, or if we don't feel safe to be ourselves, or we don't feel connected to ourselves, or we don't feel like we're living fully. And that fully is not only the epitome moments, but it's like where you feel like your days are being lived and not flying away from you, right? Because the pinnacle moments, they're pinnacles. They don't happen on a daily basis. And so a marker of a good life is that, that morning cup, that evening journal, or that walk, or the shared meal is generally creating a contentment, and that you have the power to create that in your own life. And you have the power to be audacious enough to lean into what you know you could do, and lean into the audacious idea that you living your best life gives permission for another woman to do the same. Remember, our motto for this season is listen to her. So if you have an inkling that she's wanting you to dream a little bit bigger, I'd suggest listening to her. Thanks for being here on the Rebirth Podcast. See you back here next week. Thank you so much for being here on the Rebirth Podcast. Where would we be without you? Do us a favor, share, like, subscribe, and if you're feeling especially generous and you really want this to be the kind of messaging that is all over social media, one of positivity and upliftment, give us a 5-star review wherever you enjoy listening to the Rebirth Podcast.